Okay, so welcome to another deep dive. And today we're going to Italy.
Ooh, Italy.
Yeah, well, not literally. We're diving into a planned university strike.
Oh, okay.
Okay? Yeah, it's scheduled for Halloween, actually, October 31st, 2024.
Interesting date.
Right. So we're going beyond the headlines with this one,
Yeah.
not just like what's happening on the surface, but really trying to understand what's causing all this discontent. And we've got a great source for this deep dive, a flyer distributed by the strike organizers.
Oh, so straight from the source.
Yeah, pretty much. It gives us a glimpse into like their perspective, the people who are actually going to be out there striking.
Yeah, for sure.
And, one of the things that really jumped out at me is that this is not just a typical labor dispute. This strike involves a group of university staff who are currently, get this, earning the lowest average wage in all of Italy's public sector.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty wild.
Yeah.
So let's get to it.
Sounds good.
So I think it's important to start by like setting the stage, right?
Okay.
Like, what's the background here? What are the kind of systemic issues that are fueling this strike?
Right.
And from what I've been reading, it seems like one of the biggest problems is insufficient funding for Italian universities.
Oh, yeah, for sure. That's something you see in a lot of countries, actually.
Yeah. And it's not just about staff salaries. It affects everything.
Absolutely.
Resources, research, and ultimately, the quality of education that students receive.
Yeah, if the university doesn't have enough money, it's going to impact everyone.
Right, exactly. And so now that we kind of have that context, let's dive into the flyer itself. Yeah.
Okay.
It outlines a bunch of specific demands from the strike organizers.
Okay.
The first one they list is fair pay.
Mm-hmm.
Seems pretty straightforward, right?
Yeah, I mean, who doesn't want fair pay?
Exactly. But there's a lot more to it than that, especially when you consider what's going on in Italy right now. They're asking for a salary increase that will allow them to keep up with the inflation rate.
And what is the inflation rate in Italy right now?
It's pretty high.
Yeah.
Like over the last 3 years, it's ballooned to 17.3%.
Whoa. That's a huge jump.
Yeah, it's a lot. And you can imagine like the pressure that puts on people who are trying to, support their families, pay their bills, just like live their lives.
Absolutely.
Especially with like the cost of food and energy and everything else just skyrocketing.
Right.
And the thing is, what the government is offering, like their proposed increase, is nowhere near enough to cover that.
How much are they offering?
It's 5.78%.
Oh, okay.
Which actually works out to an average annual loss of $2,900 for each employee.
Wow.
Yeah, so even though they'd technically be getting a raise, they'd actually be losing money because of how high inflation is.
Yeah, it's like they're going backwards.
Exactly. It's a really tough situation. And, when you think about these staff members who are like dedicating their careers to education, but they're constantly falling further and further behind financially, it's no wonder they're feeling burnt out.
Totally.
And that actually brings us to the next demand, which is reverse funding cuts. And yeah, these cuts are pretty serious.
How much are we talking about?
It's a $530 million cut from the Ordinary Financing Fund in 2024.
Ooh, that's a big number.
Right. And this fund is essential. It ensures the financial stability of universities across the board.
Oh.
So if a university is scrambling for funds, they have less to spend on staff, they have less to spend on resources, and even less for research projects.
Right.
And who ends up suffering?
The student.
The students. It's like this domino effect.
Yeah, totally. It's all connected.
Less funding, fewer resources, lower quality education.
Makes sense.
Right. Yeah. And speaking of students, that actually leads us to another demand in the flyer. A hiring spree.
A hiring spree. What does that mean?
Well, apparently, Italy has a way higher staff-to-student ratio than the EU average.
Oh, really?
Yeah, to put it into perspective, in Italy, it's 1 staff member for every 29 students.
Okay.
But in the EU, it's 1 staff member for every 19 students.
That's a big difference.
Yeah, so not only are staff members super overwhelmed because they have way too many students to teach and support, but it also impacts the quality of education.
Right, because if you have too many students, you can't give each one the individual attention they need.
Exactly. And I can't even imagine trying to teach a class of 29 students, let alone mentor or advise them on top of that. I'd lose my mind.
Yeah, I feel that.
So they're basically demanding a hiring plan that would bring Italy more in line with the rest of Europe.
Makes sense.
Right. Now, this next demand is a little more complicated, and honestly, it's kind of concerning.
What is it?
They're calling for an end to precarious employment.
Precarious employment.
Yeah, it basically refers to jobs that lack any real security or stability.
Oh, okay.
So we're talking about a lot of part-time positions, temporary contracts, things like that. And those often come with very limited rights and benefits, right?
Right.
So imagine trying to build a career or even just a life when you have no idea if you'll have a job next month or even next week.
Yeah, that would be stressful.
Super stressful.
All right.
And you're probably not getting a lot of support from the university in terms of benefits or protections.
So what are they asking for?
They want a new pre-roll system that would offer more stability and more rights to these workers.
Interesting.
It's a pretty significant issue, and it affects a lot of people in the university system.
Yeah, I can see that.
And now we come to the demand that really stood out to me when I first saw this flyer. The situation of the technical and administrative staff, also known as TB.
Right.
These are the folks who are the lowest paid in the entire Italian public sector.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, it's a really big problem.
Why is their pay so low?
Well, there are a few reasons. I mean, part of it is just that their pay scale was established decades ago, and it hasn't been adjusted to keep up with inflation or the cost of living.
Okay.
And their roles are often undervalued,
Yeah.
Seen as less important than academic positions.
Which isn't true at all.
Not at all. They're essential.
Totally.
But because of that perception, their salaries have just stagnated.
Oh, man.
And it creates this vicious cycle where, you can't attract or retain qualified people because the pay is so low. But because the pay is so low, the quality of work suffers.
Yeah.
And it just keeps going.
Yeah, it's a downward spiral.
Exactly.
And it impacts everyone.
Right. The whole university system suffers.
Less administrative support, longer wait times, more frustration.
Exactly. And that brings us to the final demand on the flyer. Justice for lecturers and language instructors.
Okay.
This one stems from a ruling by the European Court of Justice.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they found that Italy was actually violating EU law by denying some lecturers and language instructors certain rights and benefits.
Like what?
Like access to permanent contracts and fair pay.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And these staff members have been fighting for this for years, so this ruling was a major victory for them.
That's great.
It is. But now they want the Italian government to actually, implement the court's decision and, give them the justice they deserve.
So it's not just about getting a ruling. It's about making sure it's actually enforced.
Exactly. It's about making sure those words translate into real change.
Right.
And, when you look at all these demands together, it paints a picture of a system that's really struggling.
Yeah, definitely.
This strike, it's about so much more than just, a single labor dispute. It really speaks to how we value education and the people who dedicate their lives to it.
Absolutely. It's about fairness, sustainability, creating a university system that works for everyone.
Right. And it makes you wonder, what are the long-term consequences if these demands continue to be ignored?
Oh, yeah.
What happens to the quality of education in Italy? What happens to the people who work in these universities?
I don't know, but it's something we need to be talking about for sure.
Yeah, definitely. It's a conversation that needs to happen.
Yeah.
And hopefully this deep dive has given our listeners some food for thought.
I think so, yeah.
Because this isn't just an Italian problem. These are challenges that universities all over the world are facing.
Right. It's about how we as a society value education and how we support the people who make it happen.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's something to think about.
Definitely.
Okay, well, that's our deep dive for today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for joining.